So I saw this meme the other day, and it kind of stuck with me. I find it interesting that gamers are making such a big deal about Xbox and PlayStation killing off physical media on their consoles. I mean, on the PC, physical media has been dead for like 20 years. And don't get me wrong, it is a huge deal that Xbox and PlayStation are doing this, right? But the question is why? Like, what's different? And why do average gamers realize that this is a bad thing for them? Especially when it's not obvious that it's bad on the face of it, right? I'm talking about normal, everyday gamers. They know that it's bad, but there's also a subset of like the brainwashed zealot gamers who grotesquely defend every unhinged corporate groupthinkified decision that Microsoft and Sony proffer. And truthfully, the answer is very simple, right? Like, nobody trusts Xbox or PlayStation, and they've got good reason to distrust them, right? And Nintendo, for that matter, too. These are companies that have made decision after decision deliberately designed to hurt their customers. They have a long and storied history of screwing over their fans and ruining gaming along the way. So what is it, really? Like, what is it about this that feels so wrong? So in this video, we're going to explore all the many reasons that I've heard attempting to explain why console manufacturers are forcefully getting rid of physical media. And then we're going to talk about why those reasons are wrong, and we'll get to the real underlying core of the matter. By the end of this video, we'll have cut through all the marketing bullshit, the sponsored content from one manufacturer or another. We're going to cut through the noise that the army of trolls produce attempting to defend these decisions, and we'll have a clear and definitive answer to the question: why are Sony and Microsoft going all digital? Now, the first justification I've heard for this move is that it's because discs just act as installation media now anyways. And that's actually true. Many physical games actually ship with beta version 0.8 or something on the disc, and they need a day one patch in order to be, quote unquote, complete or a final product. But this is a manufactured problem. It is an entirely artificial issue constructed by hardware vendors in order to make physical media feel obsolete. Microsoft and Sony could enforce a rule saying that in order to have a game printed, it must be done first. They could ban day one patches that don't fix critical bugs. They have the power to do this. In fact, back at the height of the rhythm game craze, Microsoft said that Activision and MTV Games had to make their guitar and drum controllers cross-compatible between Guitar Hero and Rock Band. But they don't want to ban non-critical day one updates for a number of reasons. Some of them are understandable, but I think a lot of it is nefarious. Instead, they allow developers to ship incomplete games with we'll fix it with a day one patch mentality, and that's just normal today. Normal. All of this is to say that discs don't have to behave the way that they do, but both hardware vendors choose to architect their platforms this way. So this isn't a valid reason why they're deprecating physical media in my book. Another reason I've heard is that it's because discs are just too slow. And sure, physical media is slow. Blu-rays are especially so. But again, this is a manufactured problem. Microsoft and Sony could invest resources into developing faster read speeds for drives, but they don't want physical media to be part of their proprietary lockdown platforms anymore. So they actually have an incentive to make physical media slower and feel worse than just downloading the games. And that's not even to mention that Nintendo isn't even releasing disc-based games. They have cartridges, and those cartridges are way faster than the Blu-rays that are on other platforms. Microsoft and Sony could release games on SD card. There's a number of ways that they could do physical media, but they don't want to. All right, the next reason I've heard is that it's because physical distribution is bad for the environment. And yes, manufacturing and transit is bad for the environment, but digital distribution is equally bad, if not worse. A 2014 study found that there was no substantive difference in ecological impact for buying a game at retail versus downloading a game digitally. There are a bunch of caveats to this, and yes, this is a 10-year-old study at this point, but even after all the change and everything that we've seen in the gaming industry over the last decade, I still don't see the conclusions skewing heavily in favor of digital distribution. Back then, downloading a game was like 8 gigabytes. Now it's 80 to 100, maybe even 200 gigabytes. And then you add in the factor that there's going to be an increase in demand by about 15 to 30% after digital distribution is the only way to go here. Also, that study only considered driving to your local store, buying the physical copy and playing it, versus buying and downloading the game once onto your PlayStation 3. Realistically, if you've got Xbox Game Pass, you're going to be downloading multiple games in a month. Sometimes you're only going to play them for a few minutes and realize that you don't like the game. Or maybe even you download a game and then never play it. Or you uninstall a title to free up some space and then you re-download it later to play it again. That pattern of behavior, I can't see that as being anything less than equally environmentally damaging as physical distribution. Finally, on the topic of environmental impact and waste, which is an important factor here, these manufacturers are killing off physical media mid-generation. So what happens to all the existing systems with disk drives? The fact is, it's far more ecologically damaging to manufacture disk drives for the Series X and the PlayStation 5, and then have those disk drives be functionally useless by the midpoint of the generation's life cycle. That is manufactured e-waste. Especially since this was absolutely and inarguably Sony and Microsoft's goal since day zero with this generation, as both consoles offered lower tier, all-digital versions at launch. They knew that they would be killing off physical distribution in this console cycle, yet they manufactured these consoles with disk drives anyway to avoid the backlash that they saw with the Xbox One the last time they tried this bullshit. And frankly, that's beyond evil in my book. Alright, the next reason that I've heard is that it's better for the consumer. And no, it is absolutely not. But the argument goes that since a diskless console will cost less, it is therefore better for you, the consumer. But you can make mustard gas for less than the price of a brand new Series S. That doesn't make it good for you. First, this argument assumes that the console manufacturers are actually going to charge you less for the all-digital consoles, and even if they drop the price, realistically, it will mean a higher profit margin for them, and it's far less likely that you'll save a substantial amount. Plus, with a diskless system, you won't be able to buy used games which come with a significant cost savings. Not to mention, you won't be able to sell the games that you already own to recoup any costs that you might have incurred buying them in the first place. Finally, whatever you quote-unquote save when you buy a diskless console, you're going to spend on worthless subscriptions and or extremely overpriced digital versions of games. Paying $49.99 for Skyrim Anniversary Remastered Remakes Oops All Digital? Again? No thank you. Next up, it's because they're catching up with the times. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the video, the PC has already done this. They did it 2 decades ago. But the best place to buy games on your PC is critically not vertically integrated with the hardware or operating system vendor, at least in the vast majority of cases. But even in the case of something like the Steam Deck, where yes, it is vertically integrated with the operating system, you can install and play pretty much anything you want from anywhere you want, and it's not a console. You're not locked into one store or service. Furthermore, the PC is, at least for now, an open ecosystem with a number of places there you can buy your games from. Microsoft is actively working on changing that, and that's yet another reason why they cannot be trusted, but that's a topic for another video. But now that we've debunked most of the arguments that the shills and the trolls use to defend the destruction of the gaming industry, let's talk about the real reasons that they're actually going all digital here. Here's the thing. Microsoft wants this too badly. They've been trying to do this for over a decade. From the glib,
fortunately we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360, that's your message if you don't like it?
To the simple and effective way, they have deliberately made the console experience worse without an internet connection, and the way they've made their online experience worse if you're not dutifully on time with your monthly Xbox taxes. Sony is not without blame here either. They spent the PlayStation 3 generation with a free online service only to start charging and then somehow have a paid feature be worse than the old free one. And then both of them doing that, well, Nintendo saw that and said, hey, we're going to copy it. Building a paid service that was worse than the old free one with a paltry offering of complimentary games that are so old they should have already entered the public domain by now. History has shown us that Microsoft, Sony, and yes, Nintendo cannot be trusted. Their online services progressively get worse while fees continue to grow and value diminishes. This is all part of the corpo groupthink that has led us to where we are today, the deliberate enshittification of the gaming industry. Now, if you haven't heard of enshittification, the term originates from technologist and author Cory Doctorow. Enshittification is where a platform or service starts off great. Then, as they accumulate their audience, they deliberately abuse them in order to court business customers. Once they have a large number of business customers, then they start to abuse their position as an arbiter between business and audience, to rake in as much money for themselves as possible, intentionally ruining their platform or service and leaving them with all the power and customers without a choice. The thing is, we all know that these all digital consoles, they're not going to stop here. They're not going to simply put an end to discs and cartridges. Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo want to end the concept of ownership entirely, at least as far as you're concerned. Why charge $60 for one game, which you could then turn around and sell to recover some of that cost, when they can turn around and release a new console, and then lock all of the games for that system behind a $20 a month paywall? And then after the console's been on the market for a while, they can increase the monthly fee by ever more exorbitant prices, and you'll have no choice but to pay a higher fee since, hey, the console you bought is effectively useless unless you're paying your Xbox Game Pass premium subscription. Maybe they try to sweeten the deal by offering a rental system where you don't even own the hardware and they loan it to you for $60 a month, Game Pass included. Or what if it's just a dumb terminal and you don't have any games to download, you just stream it for $80 a month? The fact is, the big three console manufacturers know that ownership is how you build real wealth. It's why Microsoft is gobbling up studios left and right. They own those studios and therefore they stand to make the most money. And you are more valuable to them if you own nothing and happily pay your monthly fees like a good consumer. At that point, they effectively own you. This is about consolidation of power. It's about ensuring that they grow richer and gain more control, while you do not. These guys are trying to create fiefdoms where you, a digital serf, pay tribute to them, the cyber lords, who hold the encryption keys to all the virtual real estate. Why? Because they only care about power. This isn't about money anymore. We're in a post-capitalist world, and we're happily handing over the power to them, the keys to all ownership, in the name of entertainment. Now, Cory Doctorow proposes 2 ways to solve enshittification, but the big three console manufacturers, they won't like it. The first is respect for the end-to-end principle. On the internet, this means that the role of the network is to deliver data between willing senders and willing receivers. But in terms of consoles, it means that platforms must remain a neutral ground. They cannot be allowed to force content down your throat, and they should not be the arbiters of what's allowed to be played and what's not. And second, the right to exit. On social media, that means that your data is portable and that open standards are respected across all platforms. That means that you can use any client to access a service, and it means that APIs are free or reasonably priced. Here, it means that you can buy a copy of your game and you can resell it to recoup some of the cost of the investment. But the fact is, these companies, they're malicious, they're bad actors, and they are closing down the world around you. Their misanthropic behavior puts them squarely in the domestic enemy category. They cannot be trusted, and it's time that we effectively legislate against their pilfering ways. And it may seem silly to call for legislation of the video game industry, but I assure you that this is by design. They want you to think that video games are just for kids, or that it would be foolish to regulate them since it's such an inconsequential industry. But this is serious business. GamingIndustry.biz reports that in 2023, video games were a $184 billion industry. Microsoft makes a non-insignificant portion of their annual revenue from Xbox and from gaming on Windows. So don't fall for the libertarian screed of deregulation, and do not delude yourself into thinking that gaming isn't important enough to regulate. Gaming is a massive, hugely influential, and extremely profitable industry. If you live in a democracy, you have the power to affect change, and if you believe that we not only have the capacity, but also the right and even obligation to self-governance, then regulating industry, especially the video game industry, at this point in time, is an important piece of the self-governance puzzle. My name is Gardiner. That's been my rant. If you agree with me, send it to a friend and get subscribed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.